welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how I like to make red sauce. I started making my own pasta sauce a year or two ago and I am never going back to the jarred stuff. It's so worth it to make your own. And it's so pantry friendly. I mean, I always have a can of tomatoes lying around. This has become one of my go-to recipes for when I just want something simple. So without any further ado, here's how I like to make pasta sauce.
For this recipe you will need olive oil. Any nice olive oil will do, but today I am using an olive oil that I've been infusing with garlic for the last week or so. Homemade olive oil infusions can really elevate a dish and they're super fun to make. 1 large onion, chopped. Yellow, Spanish, or Vidalia will do. Get them to about this size. Try to chop them as evenly as possible so that they will cook as evenly as possible. Garlic. I like a lot of garlic. This is about half a bulb of garlic sliced into relatively thick slivers. I like to keep them chunky because there's less of a chance of them burning in the pan, and also because I love an occasional surprise bite of garlic in my sauce. Roasted red peppers. This is one 12-ounce jar that I have drained and chopped to about the same size as the onion. I love roasted red peppers in pasta sauce. They add such a wonderful depth to the flavor. You will also need red pepper flakes, garlic powder, dried basil, dried oregano, and some dried thyme. This is some thyme that I grew in my garden last summer. After the season was over, I placed it in a sunny window and intentionally stopped watering it. I allowed the whole plant to die while still in its pot, and hey presto, dried thyme. Tomato paste. I always buy tomato paste in these reusable tubes. I know I am much less likely to waste any that way. You'll also want a fruity red wine. Here I have about 1 cup of Merlot. My spouse and I don't really drink that much, so we don't usually have wine on hand, but the last time we had some left over, I poured the rest into an ice cube tray and froze it. I dropped a couple cubes into this measuring cup and let them thaw. That's what you see swimming around in the middle there. Last, but certainly not least, the tomatoes. Today I am using this giant 6-pound can of whole San Marzano tomatoes in tomato puree. We get these big boys from Costco. I have found that San Marzano tomatoes really do make a difference to the overall quality of your sauce. I highly recommend paying that little bit extra if you can. Just make sure the can clearly states that the tomatoes are from the San Marzano region of Italy, not just San Marzano style. The marketers will try to trick you, so make sure you read the label. And of course, your favorite coarse sea salt and some freshly cracked black pepper. That's all for the ingredients. Let's get cooking. Set a large pot over medium heat. Drizzle in 2 to 3 tablespoons of olive oil and let that heat up for a minute. Once that olive oil starts to shimmer, add in your onions. Make sure your pot is not overheated. We're not trying to caramelize these onions or get any color on them. We're just looking to sweat them out a little bit and let them go a bit transparent. You want them tender but not browned. Let them simmer for a few minutes, stirring occasionally. Next up is our garlic. You're going to add that garlic right on top of your onions and stir to combine. Get them all evenly coated in the olive oil and let those simmer away for a few minutes, continuing to stir occasionally. Again, we don't want color on these, so make sure you're not frying them. We're not interested in caramelizing them yet. That will come later. Third into our pot is the roasted red peppers. Same deal as with the garlic and onions. You want to get them all coated in the oil and let these 3 ingredients get to know each other for a few minutes so they can impart their flavors to one another and become a delicious, cohesive trio. Adjusting the heat as needed. Now is the time when I like to add my dried herbs and spices. I like to let the dried herbs bloom in the olive oil with the onions and garlic and peppers. I find that this helps them release their flavor much better than just dumping them in at the end. Now, if I had access to fresh herbs, I would not add them at this point. Typically when I make this sauce, I buy a package of fresh basil, rinse it, tie it up with some butcher's twine, and put the entire bunch into the sauce after I've added the tomatoes. But as I'm trying to limit my trips to the grocery store, I'll add my emergency backup dried basil now, and that will work just fine. You'll notice that I also added a decent amount of salt and pepper. We will probably need to add additional salt later, but I like to do that gradually so I don't run the risk of over-salting the sauce. Next in goes the tomato paste. I'm adding about half of this tube. The French call this technique pinçage. Girl, my French pronunciation is so terrible, it always ends up sounding like Spanish. Anyway, essentially, you're adding the tomato paste on top of your cooked but not browned vegetable mix, coating your ingredients in it, and then allowing all of that to caramelize. Doing this gives you a big flavor payoff at the end. It makes the sauce much more rich and complex. After a few minutes of caramelizing, you'll start to notice some bits sticking to the bottom of your pot. This is called the fond, another French term. Fond is flavor gold. We don't want to let that go to waste. So, to help release it from the bottom of our pot, in comes the red wine. This process is called deglazing. We are using a liquid, in this case our Merlot, to hydrate the fond and scrape it up off the bottom of the pot so that it can reincorporate itself into the sauce. See? Clean pan means no wasted fond. Allow that mixture to simmer for a few minutes to combine all the flavors and allow it to thicken. Stirring occasionally to make sure nothing is sticking to the bottom. And now for the tomatoes. Carefully, pour your lovely peeled whole San Marzano tomatoes into the pot. I always swish a little hot water around in the can to pick up any puree that I missed and add that to the pot as well. Remember that fresh basil I was talking about earlier? Well, if you've got it, now is the time to add it. Another excellent ingredient that I don't happen to have today is the rind of some good quality Parmesan cheese. You know that bit of your wedge of nice Parmesan that's too tough to eat? Chop that off and chuck it in the pot. Season to taste with salt and pepper and stir to combine. Raise the heat as high as it goes and allow it to come to a boil. Once boiling, give it one more taste to see if it needs any more salt, and if you determine that it does not, as I did, reduce the heat to low, pop a lid on it, and let it simmer for about 30 minutes, giving it a good stir every once in a while. If you've got the time, you could let this go for up to an hour. Low and slow is the name of the game on this recipe. After allowing it to simmer, it's time to break out the immersion blender. Fully submerge the blending attachment into the sauce and let her rip. Stir the stick around for a minute or two, making sure to blitz each tomato you feel. Always be sure to stop the blade before you lift it in and out of the sauce. If it's going, while you lift it up, it'll splatter all over the place. I learned that one the hard way. Don't have access to an immersion blender? No worries, you can absolutely still make this sauce. You just have to buy different tomatoes. Before I had this immersion blender, I did a lot of experimenting and I found my golden ratio. You'll need equal parts of tomato puree, crushed tomatoes, and diced tomatoes. Avoid things labeled tomato sauce, because those often have extra ingredients packed in that give you less control over the flavor. Just go for the plain canned tomatoes. You're not going to be able to achieve a smooth sauce without the use of some kind of blender, but that's just a texture preference. Either way, it's going to taste great. Once blended, give it a good stir and a quick taste. After tasting my sauce, there were a couple things that I wanted to tweak. I felt that it disappeared off my tongue rather quickly. There wasn't enough of a lasting potency to the flavor. This indicated to me that I needed more richness, more fat. So I added a little extra olive oil. The fat of the olive oil will help the sauce coat your tongue and stick around a little longer. The second flavor profile it was lacking was umami. Put it simply, umami is a chefy shorthand for savoriness and meatiness. Now, you don't necessarily need to add meat to achieve umami. The Parmesan rind I mentioned earlier would have absolutely done the trick. Alas, I didn't have one, so a splash of Worcestershire sauce works very well in a pinch. Lastly, it was leaning a little on the acidic side, and this is when I remembered that I forgot to add a pinch of sugar. Sugar is a standard ingredient in Italian pasta sauces, but a little goes a long way, so add sparingly. After taste testing and adjusting as needed, the next step in the process is to return the lid to the pot and let it simmer for an additional 30 minutes or up to an hour. After your second long simmer comes the final step in this process. I always take the lid off the pot for the final 30 minutes of simmering. This allows some water to evaporate away. This thickens the sauce and concentrates the flavors even further. If you plan on pairing the sauce with a pasta, now is the time to start thinking about boiling it, right after you remember to feed your cats. And if you forget, don't worry, they will remind you. Quick tip about pasta. Most people overcook their pasta. The goal of boiling pasta is never to cook it 100% through in the boiling water, because pasta continues to cook after you strain it. That's why a lot of people get mushy pasta. Look at the cook time listed on your pasta box and reduce it by at least 2 minutes. Then take one of the noodles out of the boiling water and taste test it. You see that little strip of white in the middle? That's al dente, and al dente is ideal. Your pasta is done! Take it off the heat and strain it right away. Then add your freshly strained pasta to your red sauce immediately. Don't let it sit in the colander and get all stuck together, and for God's sake, don't rinse your pasta. Apparently people do that. All that succeeds in doing is washing away the layer of starch on the outside of the noodles. And that starch is exactly what you need to help your sauce adhere to your pasta and help your pasta absorb your sauce. Serve immediately and enjoy. This sauce is so versatile, it could be eaten just as it is. You could keep it simple with just some parmesan, maybe some torn basil leaves if you got them, or you could really dress it up with some homemade meatballs or some sauteed mussels for you seafood lovers. Dress it up or dress it down, you are gonna love this simple yet sophisticated homemade red sauce. Thanks so much for watching my first cooking video. I know this is quite a departure from the other videos I've posted so far, but my goal with this channel has always been for it to be a kind of catch-all for my hobbies and interests. That way there's a little of something for everyone. I had a great time trying my hand at a cooking video, and I'm really excited to make more. I'll be sure to leave a written copy of this recipe in the description below, and if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll be super down to answer them. Like and subscribe and all that fun YouTube stuff, and I'll catch you next time. See ya!